Have you ever noticed how the most peaceful people are often the quietest? The ones who don't overshare, who don't rush to post every thought or life update, seem to carry a calm strength that doesn't need to be announced. In a world that constantly urges us to open up, to be transparent, to share everything from what we eat to how we feel, there's something powerful, even radical, about restraint, about choosing not to reveal everything, about knowing what to hold back. The Stoics knew this. Long before smartphones or social media, they taught that real power doesn't lie in how loudly we speak, but in how deeply we understand when to stay silent. Because here's the truth. What we choose to reveal can empower us, but it can also expose us. Every detail we share becomes something others can judge, question, or even use against us. And over time, that oversharing doesn't bring us closer to others. It erodes our sense of control. As we grow older, especially in the second half of life, between 50 and 75, this lesson becomes even clearer. Not everything needs to be said. Not every story needs to be told, and not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Privacy isn't just about secrecy, it's about boundaries, it's about dignity, and most importantly, it's about peace. Think of it like this: the most sacred things in life, love, faith, grief, healing, are often the ones we speak of in whispers or keep only for ourselves. Not because we're hiding, but because they're too valuable to be put on display. So in this video, we'll explore 8 timeless things you should never feel obligated to share. These aren't rules based on fear or isolation. They're grounded in strength, self-respect, and the Stoic understanding that sometimes silence speaks louder than any words. Before you tell someone your next secret, your next plan, your next pain, pause. Ask yourself, does this bring me peace, or am I giving away a piece of my power? Let's take this journey together and uncover why the most confident, grounded version of yourself may just be the one who says less and lives more. Stay with me. 1. Age more than just a number. Let me ask you something. Why is it that one of the first things people ask us is, "How old are you?" It sounds innocent, just a way to break the ice, to place someone in context. But behind that question lies a subtle judgment. Because once people know your age, they start forming silent expectations. They might assume what you should be doing, what you're too old for, or too young to understand. They may talk down to you, offer advice you never asked for, or quietly place limits on what you're capable of. And the most dangerous part? You might start believing them. Our society places immense value on youth. Magazines, ads, social media. It's all built around the illusion that being young means being relevant, being valuable. But the truth is, age is just a number. And more often than not, it's a number others use to confine us. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, "We complain about how short life is, and yet we live as if it will never end." We measure our lives by years, birthdays, milestones. But what if we measured it by meaning, by what we still have to give, by how present we are today? You see, when you keep your age private, you're not hiding something, you're protecting your power. You're refusing to let the world define your timeline. You're saying, "I am not your statistic. I am not a label on a chart. I am still becoming." Because age doesn't determine your energy, your creativity, your potential. It doesn't measure your impact, your wisdom, or your worth. And when you choose not to share that number, people are forced to see you, not the assumptions they attach to a date. So if you've ever felt the weight of expectations, of being too late to start or too early to speak up, let this be your reminder. Your timeline is your own. You don't owe anyone a number to prove your value. The life you build, the peace you carry, the difference you make, those are the things that define you. You may be a number, but you are not. 2. Financial privacy. Why your money should stay your business. Let's talk about something we're all affected by, but few are truly comfortable discussing. Money. It doesn't matter how much or how little you have. Once people get a glimpse into your financial world, their perception of you changes. If you're doing well, some may see you as successful, but others may quietly see you as a resource, a solution, a wallet. Suddenly, your success becomes a magnet, drawing expectations, requests, even silent resentment. Family members might assume you'll help out. Friends might expect you to cover the bill. And strangers? They may treat you with admiration or suspicion. But if your financial life isn't so picture perfect, if you're still figuring it out, recovering from setbacks, or simply living modestly, you risk being judged in the opposite direction. People may assume you've made bad choices, that you failed, that you're less than, and yet money has nothing to do with wisdom or integrity or heart. The Stoics knew this long before modern economies existed. Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." What matters most isn't how much you have. It's how free you are from being owned by what you have. And one of the most powerful forms of freedom? Financial privacy. When you keep your finances private, you protect your autonomy. You free yourself from unfair comparisons, from expectations you never agreed to, from becoming someone else's plan B. Because here's the truth. The less people know about your money, the more power you have over how you live. And let's be honest, there's a difference between generosity and obligation. True giving comes from the heart, not from pressure. But when people assume your wealth or your lack of it, it changes the energy. Suddenly, kindness becomes a duty, or your struggle becomes gossip. Privacy is protection, it's dignity, it's the quiet strength of choosing to live on your own terms. So whether you have a little or a lot, remember this. Your financial life is no one's business but your own. Let your choices speak louder than your bank balance, and let your peace be more visible than your possessions. True wealth isn't in your account. It's in your ability to live with clarity, self-respect, and freedom. 3. Family secrets. Not for outsiders. Let's be honest, no family is perfect. Every household has its stories, its arguments, its misunderstandings, and its growing pains. There are moments of love and laughter, but also moments of tension, regret, and silence. It's all part of being human. But here's the thing, just because something happened inside your family doesn't mean it needs to be shared outside of it. In a world addicted to confession culture, where people are encouraged to share every detail of their personal lives online, there's something sacred about keeping family matters private. Why? Because once you open that door to outsiders, you also invite judgment. People will form opinions based on fragments. They'll give advice without understanding the context, and sometimes they'll spread your story in ways you never intended. What could have been handled quietly, respectfully, within the family suddenly becomes public. Now it's gossip. Now it's drama. Now it's something heavier than it ever needed to be. The Stoics taught us this: we cannot control the words or actions of others, but we can control how we respond. And sometimes the wisest response is silence. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It doesn't mean suppressing pain, but it does mean honoring the people you share blood with, even when things get messy. Because once trust is broken, once private wounds are put on public display, it's incredibly hard to repair. Think about it. Have you ever confided in someone only to hear your words repeated by someone else? That feeling of betrayal? Now imagine how that feels within a family. Privacy protects dignity, and dignity allows space for healing. There's a time to talk and a time to stay quiet. There's a time to confront and a time to protect. When it comes to the family, choose the path of wisdom. Not everything needs to be explained. Not every conflict needs a witness. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is work through it privately, with care, with patience, and with respect. Because family is not for public consumption. It's not a performance. It's a bond, flawed, but worth protecting. So the next time you feel tempted to vent your family issues to a friend, a coworker, or a social media feed, pause. Ask yourself, will this help heal, or will it deepen the divide? Protect your people, protect the sacred, and let silence do the work that words sometimes can't. 4. Health, protecting your personal privacy. There's something deeply personal about your health. It's your body, your journey, your experience, and yet we live in a time where people casually ask about your conditions, your medications, your treatments, like it's just small talk. But it's not. Because once you start sharing the details of your health, something changes. People stop seeing you, your mind, your energy, your strengths, and start seeing your diagnosis. You become the person with instead of the person who is. It's subtle, but powerful. You may notice conversations start to shift. Suddenly, people talk to you more cautiously. They offer sympathy you didn't ask for, or unsolicited advice you never needed. Have you tried this supplement? Maybe it's your diet. My cousin had the same thing. They mean well, but that doesn't mean it helps. In fact, it can be overwhelming. And at times, it even feels like your health is no longer your own. It becomes a topic for others to dissect, diagnose, or define. But here's the truth. Your health does not define your identity. It's one part of your story, but it is not the whole story. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And one of the greatest forms of strength, choosing how you are seen, choosing what you share and what you protect. When you keep your health private, you're not being secretive, you're being self-respecting. You're saying, I will not let others reduce me to a condition. I will not allow worry or pity to replace dignity and perspective. And yes, talk to your doctor. Share with people you trust. Seek support when needed. But understand this, not everyone needs a seat at the table of your healing. Not everyone has earned the right to your most vulnerable truths. Because when you maintain control over your story, you maintain control over your strength. You're not just a patient, you're a thinker, a doer, a force. You're someone who has lived, endured, overcome. So the next time you're tempted to overshare about your health, pause. Ask yourself, will this empower me or reduce me? Your health is your own. Protect it, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. Because silence isn't denial. Sometimes it's the highest form of self-respect. 5. Intimacy. Keep the sacred sacred. Let's talk about something deeply personal, yet too often turned into public spectacle. Intimacy, love, vulnerability, connection. These are not just emotions. They are sacred spaces built on trust, nurtured through time, and held together by the quiet things we don't always say out loud. But in today's world, we're taught that nothing is too personal to share. We live in an era where private moments are broadcast for likes, where intimacy becomes entertainment, and where vulnerability is often mistaken for visibility. But here's a truth we often forget. Not everything that is real needs to be revealed. When you talk too openly about your intimate life, your relationships, your private moments, your physical closeness, you invite more than curiosity. You invite assumptions, opinions, judgments, and sometimes ridicule. People will bring their own biases, they'll compare, they'll speculate, and suddenly what was once sacred becomes subject to casual commentary. The Stoics understood this well. They taught us that what is meaningful should be treated with respect. Seneca said, "Enjoy present pleasures in such a way as not to injure future ones." In other words, when you expose something too soon or too much, you risk damaging the very thing that makes it special. Think about it. Real intimacy doesn't crave an audience. It grows quietly. It deepens through moments of trust, not through public display. And it survives because it is protected, not performed. When you speak too freely about your love life, especially the physical aspects, you may unintentionally cheapen something meant to be cherished. You may open doors for people to question, misunderstand, or even judge a bond they were never meant to witness. But keeping intimacy private isn't about shame. It's about respect for yourself and for the person you share it with. It's about saying, this is ours. It's not for everyone else's eyes or opinions. Because intimacy isn't only about bodies. It's about presence, attention, trust. And none of those things thrive under a spotlight. So if you've ever felt pressured to share more than you're comfortable with, pause. Ask yourself, am I honoring this connection or am I exposing it? Let your love be a refuge, not a performance. Let your private life remain sacred. And in doing so, you may find that the strongest relationships are the ones the world knows the least about. 6. Charity, the quiet power of giving. Let's talk about a kind of strength that's often overlooked in today's world. Quiet generosity. Because in a culture obsessed with recognition, applause, and online validation, even good deeds are sometimes turned into performances. A simple act of kindness can easily become content. A donation becomes a headline. A gift turns into a social media post. But the Stoics saw it differently. They believed that virtue is its own reward, that true goodness doesn't need a stage, a spotlight, or even a thank you. And maybe that's a question worth asking ourselves. Are we giving to help or to be seen helping? Because the difference is everything. When you give in silence, without announcement, without expectation, you preserve something sacred. You protect the dignity of the person receiving, and you keep your own intentions pure. There's an old saying, a left hand should not know what the right hand is giving. It's not just about humility, it's about respect. Think about someone who's struggling. Maybe they're proud. Maybe they've worked hard their whole life, and now, for whatever reason, they need a little help. If you offer support publicly, it might feel like charity to you, but to them, it could feel like exposure. Now imagine offering that same support privately, quietly, with no fanfare. You've helped, truly helped, and you've done it in a way that protects their sense of worth. That's not just generosity, that's wisdom. Because giving isn't just about money or resources, it's about intention. It's about lifting someone up without making them feel small. Seneca warned us about this long ago. A benefit is rendered worthless by the expectation of gratitude. When you give with strings attached or with the camera rolling, you're not really giving. You're bargaining, you're turning virtue into currency. But when you give and expect nothing in return, no praise, no recognition, you become something rare. You become a quiet force for good. So ask yourself, what kind of impact do I want to make? One that shouts for attention, or one that echoes in someone's life long after you're gone? The quietest kindnesses are often the most lasting, the ones done without witnesses, without hashtags, without reward. Let your generosity be private. Let it be sacred. Because real giving doesn't make noise. It makes a difference. 7. Honor. Built by actions, not announcements. Let's take a moment to talk about a word that used to carry great weight. Honor. Today, in a world that rewards attention and visibility, honor has become a bit quiet. We live in a culture where success is broadcasted, achievements are marketed, and even good intentions are polished for public consumption. But true honor, it doesn't shout, it doesn't need a spotlight. It reveals itself through how you live, not through how often you talk about what you've done. If you've built something meaningful, overcome great obstacles, or contributed quietly behind the scenes, does the world really need to know every detail? Sometimes the more we talk about our victories, the less powerful they become. Not because they don't matter, but because constant self-promotion starts to erode the very dignity we worked so hard to earn. The Stoics taught us that respect is not something you demand. It's something you command through your actions. Seneca once said, "It is the mark of an unstable mind to seek admiration from others." When your sense of worth depends on being seen, being praised, or being celebrated, you hand over control of your identity to others. And once you do that, your peace becomes fragile. Your confidence becomes conditional. But when your integrity speaks louder than your words, you become untouchable. Think about the people you admire most. Are they the loudest in the room? Or are they the ones whose presence is felt even when they say little? Real honor doesn't need applause. It grows in silence through discipline, consistency, humility. And yes, you can be proud of your achievements, but there's a difference between being proud and constantly seeking praise. When you boast too often, people start to question your motives. It can invite resentment, spark envy, or make others feel small by comparison. Not because you intended harm, but because unchecked pride can cast a long shadow. The Stoics believe that the most admirable people are those who carry greatness with quiet grace. They don't need to remind the world of who they are, because their actions already say enough. So if you've done something meaningful, hold it close. Let it shape who you are, not how loudly you speak. Live in a way that commands respect, and you'll never have to ask for it, because in the end, honor isn't a performance. It's a way of being. 8. Old wounds, let them rest. Let me ask you something. How many times have you replayed an old insult in your mind? A careless comment, a moment of humiliation, a conversation that left a scar. It might have happened years ago, but somehow it still lives inside you like a recording that refuses to be deleted. The pain is real. But here's the question. Are you still hurt? Or are you just still holding on? The Stoics understood this well. Epictetus said, "If someone is able to provoke you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." In other words, the pain continues not because the insult was powerful, but because we keep revisiting it. We give it life again and again. Every time we retell the story, whether to a friend, to a therapist, or to ourselves, we reopen the wound. We validate the words of someone who likely doesn't even remember saying them. And we hand over our peace to a moment that no longer exists. But here's the thing. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what they did. It's about releasing what it did to you. It's saying, I choose not to carry this anymore. Not for their sake, but for yours. Because the truth is, most of the time, the person who hurt you has moved on. They're living their life. They're not stuck in the loop. You are. And every time you relive that pain, you give them more time in your mind than they ever deserved. But when you hold your silence, when you let the insult go unspoken, you create space for something else to grow. Perspective, strength, freedom. You stop being defined by what happened and start being shaped by how you choose to move forward. Now, this doesn't mean you pretend it didn't hurt. It doesn't mean you don't process it. But there comes a point where telling the story again doesn't help. It just reattaches you to the pain. So here's a better question. What could you be creating with the energy you spend remembering what broke you? You are not your scars. You are not someone's careless words. You are not the insult that was never apologized for. You are someone who gets to choose what stays and what you're finally ready to let go. Because sometimes the most powerful act of healing is the one no one sees. The quiet decision to stop telling the story. 9. Future goals. Act before you announce. Let's be honest. How many times have you felt excited about a new goal and immediately told someone about it? Maybe you were hoping for encouragement. Maybe you thought sharing it would make you more accountable. But have you ever noticed? The more you talk about your plan, the less energy you actually have to execute it. There's a hidden cost to announcing things too early. The moment you say, I'm going to do this, you open a door, not just to support, but to doubt, distraction, and unnecessary pressure. You invite opinions, expectations, and sometimes resistance. The Stoics were deeply aware of this. They believed that our strength lies in quiet action, not in loud promises. Because every time we speak of a goal too soon, we dilute its power. We turn inward intentions into public performances. And here's the hard truth. Sometimes we share our goals not to pursue them, but to be admired for having them. Have you ever done that? Announced a big plan only to feel validated just by people's reactions, and then lost motivation to follow through? It's a subtle trap, and it happens to the best of us. That's why the Stoics taught, don't waste your energy convincing others, let your results do the talking. When you keep your goals close, you protect their purity. You shield them from doubt, delay, and unnecessary debate. You stay focused, not on how things look, but on what actually matters. Execution. You don't owe the world an explanation. You owe yourself commitment, discipline, and momentum. Think about the most inspiring people you've known. Were they the loudest in the room, constantly announcing what they were going to do? Or were they the ones who worked quietly and let their outcomes speak volumes? In a world obsessed with updates, likes, and public declarations, choose silence. Not because you're afraid to be seen, but because you're focused on becoming. Because success that grows in silence is success rooted in strength. Not ego, not approval, just truth and effort. So the next time you feel the urge to broadcast your plans, pause. Channel that energy into action instead. Build it in silence. And when it's ready, let the results be your introduction. That's not just Stoic wisdom, it's practical power. So here's the truth. Real power isn't about how much noise you make. It's about how much presence you carry in silence. We live in a world that rewards oversharing, where validation is a currency and silence is misunderstood as weakness. But the Stoics saw it differently. They taught that restraint is strength, that dignity lives in discretion, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all. When you choose to keep certain things private, your goals, your wealth, your wounds, your dreams, you're not hiding. You're protecting. You're setting boundaries not for isolation, but for clarity and peace. Because what you reveal can invite support, but what you guard builds resilience. Ask yourself, do I want to be seen or do I want to be solid? Do I want attention or do I want peace? Real transformation happens quietly. No spotlight, no applause, just action, discipline, stillness. And the beautiful irony is, the less you explain, the more people feel your depth. The more you protect your energy, the more powerful it becomes. The more you embody your truth, the less you need to prove anything to anyone. So as you walk through life, carry this with you. You don't need to broadcast your every move. You just need to move with purpose. And when in doubt, choose the quiet path. Not because it's easier, but because it's wiser. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Comment, I choose silence, if you're ready to live with quiet strength. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, because the most powerful transformations don't need to be shouted. They begin in silence. See you in the next video.